He collapsed alone in the wild, then lions surrounded him. But what they did next will leave you speechless. Could you stay calm in their paws? Tell us in the comments. What would you do? Under a golden African sun, the savannah stretched wide, alive with movement and song. Weaver birds chirped from acacia branches, and zebras grazed in the open distance, their stripes flickering under shafts of morning light. It was a familiar world to Daniel Kintu, one he had walked for nearly 3 decades as a ranger and guardian. Daniel stood outside the ranger post, boots dusted with red earth, radio slung across his shoulder. Static crackled before a voice broke through. Eastern Ridge, baby rhino trapped, possibly injured. He didn't hesitate. Daniel's face tightened with purpose. He'd seen calves tangled in wire, separated from their mothers, or stuck in deep gullies after fleeing predators. Each call, each cry for help, was urgent. He packed his medical satchel and strapped it to his motorbike. The sun had already begun to climb, its heat settling in waves across the plain. As he climbed onto the motorbike, he chose a faster route, an old trail carved through a clay basin. He'd ridden it many times before. "I'll be quicker this way," he muttered to himself. "Every minute counts." He throttled forward, the engine roaring into the distance. The shortcut was narrow and winding, slicing through thorny underbrush and dipping into shallow ditches. Daniel leaned forward, urging the bike through the ruts. But the rains from days prior had changed the trail, slick and treacherous now. The midday sun bore down, casting shimmering illusions over the soaked ground. He shifted gears to climb a small hillock, but the front tire caught a muddy patch. The motorbike lurched. Instinct made him grip tighter, but the handlebars twisted violently in his grasp. The world tipped sideways. The bike skidded and flung Daniel into the sludge. His helmet struck a protruding root, and the motorbike toppled with a thud beside him. Mud splattered his khaki uniform. His radio fell from his belt and landed a few feet away, cracked silent. Daniel lay still, his breath shallow. A streak of blood trickled from his temple, and his eyes fluttered closed. The wind moved softly through the grass around him. Crickets hummed. Overhead, a kite circled, indifferent, and then the plains grew strangely quiet. In this silence, broken only by the ticking of the bike's cooling engine, the land itself seemed to hold its breath, as if something ancient and unseen had stirred. A rustle came from the tall grass, subtle, deliberate. Then, emerging one by one, 5 lions stepped onto the trail. A broad-maned male led them, his frame regal and calm. Behind him, 4 lionesses moved in formation. Their golden eyes reflected light as they studied the fallen human, noses twitching, tails flicking. They did not charge. They did not roar. Instead, they sniffed the air and crept closer. Something about him held them still. A scent, a memory. Years ago, these very lions, mere cubs then, had been plucked from death by this man. Caught in a blazing bushfire, singed and helpless, they had been rescued by Ranger Kintu, who cradled them in blankets and carried them through smoke. He'd fed them by hand at the Wildlife Center until they could be re-wielded. And now, they had returned, not by command but by instinct, by bond. The lionesses fanned out. One stood at Daniel's head, another by his feet. The male sat, poised, just beyond his outstretched hand. There was no sound but the breeze shifting the grass. To any who might stumble upon this scene, it would seem absurd. But here, beneath the midday sun and under the witness of the wide sky, nature remembered. And in its own language, it was answering kindness with something rarely seen, loyalty. Time passed. A jackal crept along the edge of the clearing, drawn by the smell of blood. It took 2 cautious steps forward, then froze. One of the lionesses rose, growled low, and took a deliberate stride toward the scavenger. The jackal bolted into the bush without a glance back. Above, vultures began to spiral lower, but none dared land. The pride remained alert. The lions did not feed. They did not rest. They watched. The lioness closest to Daniel sniffed his shoulder, then nudged it with her muzzle, as if testing for breath. He did not stir. She lowered herself beside him, her sandy gold flank brushing against the torn fabric of his shirt. Occasionally, her tail flicked flies from his body. They formed a perimeter, a silent barrier between their fallen guardian and the opportunists of the wild. Each movement was measured, not defensive, not aggressive, but protective. For hours, they stayed. The afternoon sun cast longer shadows. Heat gave way to a warm breeze. Dust swirled in lazy spirals across the trail. A baboon barked in the distance. The lions didn't move. This was no accident of coincidence. No brief curiosity. This was something older, rooted in memory and the unspoken threads that sometimes, only sometimes, bind two worlds together. Back at the ranger outpost, concern began to rise. Daniel had not checked in. He always did. Repeated calls crackled, unanswered. The radio remained stubbornly silent. One ranger adjusted the frequency, hoping for a response. Another paced the room, worry etched into his face. He would have called, one muttered. Daniel doesn't go silent. They dispatched a drone, small, swift, fitted with a wide-angle camera. Within minutes, it soared above the Easter Trail, scanning the muddy shortcut Daniel often took. Then they saw him. The motorbike overturned. Daniel, motionless beside it. And then pause. Confusion. Lions. The drone zoomed closer. 5 lions encircled his body. One lying beside him. Not feeding. Not attacking. Just there. Gasps filled the ranger post. He surrounded, someone whispered. No. Look again. They're not hurting him. Orders flew. A rescue team assembled with urgency, yet caution. Weapons were packed, not for use, but in fear of what might go wrong. But there was a glimmer of hope. Something about the lions' posture. Their silence. Their stillness. Under a sky alive with wind and shifting clouds, 2 worlds prepared to meet again. One ruled by instinct, the other by oath. Late afternoon sunlight dappled the savannah in warm amber. The rescue jeep rumbled along the muddy trail, tires gripping soft earth. As the vehicle neared the site, hearts pounded. 5 lions. 1 man. The driver slowed, gears grinding. But what they found defied every instinct and expectation. The lions didn't charge. They didn't growl. They simply watched. Daniel lay still, breathing shallowly, skin pale but alive. Flies buzzed around the wound on his forehead. A ranger stepped forward cautiously, kneeling beside him. Another moved to secure the perimeter, but the lions did not move. Then, the male lion blinked slowly. As if delivering a signal no human could hear, he turned and padded into the grass. One by one, the lionesses followed. There was no rush, no fear, only dignity. Within seconds, they had vanished, as if they had never been there at all. The rangers worked quickly, checking Daniel's pulse, dressing his wound, lifting him into the back of the vehicle. But their hands trembled. They had not rescued him alone. They were latecomers to a vigil held by kings. As the jeep turned back toward the station, the savannah whispered behind them. Something sacred had happened here, and it would not be forgotten. 3 days later, Daniel awoke in a clinic bed, blinking against the soft white of the ceiling. Bandages wrapped his head. The murmur of voices floated through the window. A young ranger entered, eyes wide with emotion. "They found you," he said softly. But they weren't the first. Daniel's brow furrowed. The lions, the ranger continued. The ones from the bushfire. They were guarding you. Silence. Daniel turned slowly toward the window, eyes clouded. They remembered, he whispered. No other words came. Far from the clinic, under a clearing sky still soaked in daylight, the Pride lay atop a low ridge. The male watched the plains below. One lioness yawned and stretched. Another cleaned her paws. There was no sign of violence, no sign of fear, only memory and loyalty. Sometimes, nature offers no explanation, no logic, only a gesture, a decision made not in the mind, but in something deeper. Daniel would return to the bush eventually, but he would never again see lions the same way, nor would the world. For sometimes, the wild remembers kindness, and in rare, profound moments, the hunter becomes the protector. Not all memories are human. Sometimes, The wild carries your kindness like a scar, etched into the soul of the land. If this story moved you, like it to honor rangers like Daniel Quinto. Globe Showing Europe Africa subscribe for more true wildlife stories where nature shows its heart. Lion Face, what would you do if lions guarded a fallen man? Comment below. Push pin, hit the bell, because the savannah has more secrets to share.